Well, Jeanne, hello. How are you?
Great, Marty. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming to the 301 West Bay building, downtown Jacksonville.
I know it.
Center of the universe, as I like to call it.
Center of the universe.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you. I want to know where you grew up. Are you from Jacksonville?
Kind of. My dad was in the Navy, so I am a very proud military dependent, Navy brat, as they say. So the Navy brought us here, but we were mostly East Coast, and then I went to middle and high school in Panama, Central America.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Panama City.
No,
you mean
Panama, Central America. So Panama City, Panama.
So fluent in Spanish?
Was.
Okay.
Haven't practiced, so use it or lose it. Have had and was a fantastic experience, very interesting. In the 80s, went to college in Connecticut, made a stop in DC to intern, and then came to Jacksonville. I worked for 3 years.
Where were you working at college?
After college, Florida Medical Association.
Florida Medical Association.
Yeah,
So, here in Jacksonville?
Yeah, here in Jacksonville. That was at the time when
hang on. How'd you get from Washington back to Jax?
Yeah, so my dad had 3 tours of duty in Jacksonville in the 70s. So he was carrier-based pilot, Navy pilot, and he, so it was when there was Cecil, was a master jet base in Jacksonville, one of the largest in the United States. And so he flew jets on aircraft carriers. And so he had 2 tours, back-to-back tours of duty, sea duty, as they say, and then shore duty at NAS Jacksonville.
All right.
So we were here 7 years growing up. I went to elementary school here on the west side at Sacred Heart School.
Okay.
And and so they came back to Jacksonville after leaving Panama because of the Noriega, everything. So they came back to Jacksonville. I didn't have a job yet. I was planning to go to graduate school, but kind of put that on hold for a little bit because I wanted to work before I really decided on graduate school, and so I came here.
Okay.
And so worked. Florida Medical Association met a fantastic man named John Thrasher.
Okay.
Who eventually became president of FSU, as most people know. But he was really my very first mentor.
Okay.
One of my very first who gave me the proverbial kick in the backside to go to law school and to go to Florida State. So after that, I worked for Florida Blue in marketing research, and then went to law school at Florida State.
Okay.
So not many people know that part of my background, but
all right.
yeah.
So your law degree from Florida State,
right?
And then you liked Jacksonville so much,
yes,
that you came back.
I did.
Right?
Yeah.
What drew you to Jacksonville? Because when you get a law degree, you did time in Washington, you said, up in the Northeast. Like, you could have kind of gone anywhere.
Right.
You had your parents here.
My parents.
What else drew you back here?
Well, and I had a fiance, but
that'll do it.
But I knew I wanted to stay in Florida after living overseas and living in other places. I really wanted to be near water.
Yeah.
And the climate, but I didn't think I would stay in Jacksonville. I wasn't sure, but I didn't know that I would stay here. But by the time I graduated from law school in 1995, you could really feel that the city was changing. When I came here in 1989, it was very much still kind of in the 70s.
Really?
And even the culture, and we still had blue light laws, like Sundays. They wouldn't serve alcohol.
No alcohol.
Yeah,
sales
I
on
mean
Sundays.
all of that. I mean, just very, not that that's like important on Sundays, but just very, just.
We know what you do on Sundays.
Not anymore. But yeah, it was just it wasn't. A lot of people said, why are you going there? And isn't that the place that smells? But I mean, that's how Jacksonville was known. We had tolls on 95, and Fuller Warren Bridge was a toll bridge, as was the Matthews, and we had tolls, and we had the power, the paper mills that so the city smelled bad. So that's how people knew us, tolls, and
And
smells
the stench.
bad.
And you
Right.
couldn't drink on Sundays.
Right. I mean, people literally would ask why. Well, but there was an excitement. We knew we were getting the Jaguars.
Okay.
And so we got the Jaguars. I think that was 1992, 93, and then the first season was 95.
Yeah.
So had season tickets right out of the gate, along with the Seminoles. But yeah.
So that seemed to be a pretty big change for the city.
It was a big change for the city.
Getting the Jags, right?
It was in terms, in ways, in direct, kind of economic ways, but also in terms of commerce, in terms of people wanting to make it a destination, more businesses wanting to be here or taking a second or third look at Jacksonville.
Interesting.
And by that time the tolls were gone, and by that time certainly we didn't have the stench. So there was
smelled a little better.
Right. There was there were big shifts in, how you could just feel the potential.
Okay.
I would say.
Okay.
And it was reasonable. It was incredibly reasonable, to live, to have a family if you wanted to live on the water. There were so many things about the atmosphere, and it was a good place to raise a family. And knowing that I wanted to have, children and grow a family, it was a great place. Thinking about Orlando or Tampa or those, other environments.
30 years from now, do you think they're going to be saying the same thing about, where we're sitting today?
I don't know. We have been on the verge of potential for so long. And so it gets...
That's our motto, the verge of potential.
Yeah, the verge of greatness. And there are so many aspects of the city that are great.
Yeah.
We're very big. So I think that's a pro and a con, but I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping in 30 years from now that we will have arrived. We will be not only a destination, but a model for others.
Could the University of Florida be today's version of the Jacksonville Jaguars?
As any good lawyer would say, probably it depends, but it really is going to depend on the significance of the presence. We have two fantastic universities and a state college here.
Yep.
That I think sometimes get overlooked and as someone who worked in higher education here, they are just workforce engines for our community. But in terms of maybe bringing a research distinction and elevating like the number of PhDs per capita. Most people are not going to look at that, but some people actually look at that, the number of patents per capita. So research and innovation, those types of things that UF can drive just intuitively by its own DNA.
Yeah.
That's what UF does, especially graduate programs. So if they can bring some of that, and that's what I understand, there will be graduate programs and higher level, either scientific or financial type of programs that will encourage and inspire innovation, creativity, and that type of thing. Then I think so.
UNF is in the process of, forgive me, I don't know the nomenclature, but they're in the process of getting a new accreditation to be a research school.
To be a research school. So there are different levels for levels of funding that go along with different levels of research, and your research is in specific areas, and you have to satisfy, as you mentioned, certain accreditation requirements, which is going to go look at faculty and their facilities. It's going to look at their programming and what they're planning and how they plan to fund that. But what it will ultimately make them eligible for additional funding.
Right.
The only other regional university that I'm aware of that has that level of funding is USF. I think UCF may have it as well.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's UF and FSU are the powerhouses in terms of the highest level of research in terms of funding in the state. But it also, once you get those, then it gives you the infrastructure to begin to attract outside funding, like from the National Institutes of Health, from public and private foundations, that type of thing. And so, yes, there are different levels, and then there's the preeminent level where you have FSU and UF.
And so it sounds like this is a good thing.
I think. It depends, but I hope so. I think so.
Yeah, I mean,
with the level of investment.
Yeah, so that should theoretically help the community as a whole.
Right.
better paying jobs,
Yes.
things like that.
Well, and more density, hopefully downtown,
Yeah.
in an area of downtown that has historically been underpopulated and underdeveloped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your view of downtown from then until now? We talked about kind of the smell and the no alcohol sales on Sundays. We've always had potential. We had the landing.
Yeah.
We had the landing site here for a long time. Or actually, before I ask that, because I think that it's important, before I ask that, tell me more about what you do now.
Yeah.
Like what is your role in?
Right. Well, I've had a fantastic career, and from working in real estate for Regency Centers.
Yep.
So a national real estate investment trust. As you know, retail anchored shopping center throughout the United States.
Yep.
And then I had a chance to work for the city, and I was the head, lawyer for city council.
You were the head lawyer
For city council.
For city council.
Yeah, very interesting.
What time frame was this?
This was early 2000s.
Okay.
And Mayor Payton was coming into office,
Okay.
and he was, as deals were going through city council, I had city council members who wanted to renegotiate the deal, because the city was then in the business of loaning money,
Okay.
which in my opinion is just never a good position for any municipality to be in.
They would give loans to developers.
To small businesses.
To small businesses?
Very small businesses. And we were, just in terms of the legal positioning, it wasn't, there weren't a lot of assurances that the companies or the individuals would be able to pay it back. So I was frequently called upon, because of my background, to restructure the deal. That led me to the what was then called the Jacksonville Economic Development Commission, JEDC. It was an extension of the mayor's office and controlled by a board. But that was the agency that managed all three of the CRAs downtown. So it was called the DDA at the time.
Okay.
But all of the economic development in the county, as well as and city, and the conversion of Cecil from the master jet base to a commerce center. So we had a massive economic development administration loan. So I went from director of business development to deputy director to director at the JEDC at a time when we implemented a brand new strategic plan.
Yeah.
Designed it, implemented it. It was quantitative based in terms of assessing factors, ROI for, a real ROI type of instrument that determined the level of return on investment for taxpayers. Without going too far down that road, that really stimulated in me a great interest in, because I had an opportunity to do urban redevelopment, suburban redevelopment, community redevelopment, and working within a regulatory structure, but to help on the business side of the deal instead of the legal side of the deal, to help developers and government make a development happen.
All right. I could spend 3 more days with you. So let me try to make this at least within the confines of this afternoon. So how do, not necessarily Jacksonville, but because I want to keep it relatively broad. And I'm not asking what Jacksonville does good or bad or anything like that, but what do good government, institutions do to help spur development? What works, what doesn't work in your mind as you see it? Well,
you really have to kind of take the place where you see it. And you asked earlier what I do now. I help businesses and developers navigate that regulatory landscape, in addition to being, a legal practitioner and providing outside general counsel for businesses. But there's a role for government, but there's also a role for the private sector. Okay. And there's also a role for the nonprofit sector. And there's a role for innovation, and innovation in a way that is not going to look like other types of innovation. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So government. Government's going to provide infrastructure.
Okay.
We know we have an incredible amount of investment coming from the last two administrations that, invested, tens of millions of dollars into our downtown infrastructure.
Infrastructure meaning streets,
roads, the Riverwalk, everything that's going into that,
parks.
the parks, the everything that's gone into in and around the stadium.
Yep.
And then the Emerald Trail.
Sure.
We've got and even into La Villa, what's
Yes.
happening there. So, the role of government in economic development, sort of a textbook definition would be, priming the pump, and that means how do you get the right amount of investors to come in? We saw this happen on the South Bank. You give enough incentives so it brings enough investors in that it stimulates other investors to come in without incentives.
Okay.
Right.
So what incentives? What do those look like? Because City of Jacksonville does, if I understand it right, they do completion grants and also real estate tax abatements if you complete the project, right? It sounds like they used to give loans. You were saying they used to give loans to small businesses, but should government be in the position of a lender?
Well, I think that's a philosophical debate, and I'd say no.
Okay.
Right, just because there are other ways to leverage the private sector and banks to encourage them to do that.
Okay.
Right, so I think there is a partnership that you can build between public and private sector, or even public and nonprofit sector, and Mayor Payton did that in creating a small business lending fund for the Jacksonville Small and Emerging Business program. There are many, many examples that we've had over the years in Jacksonville where you're encouraging the banks, the private sector to do that. That said, there is a role for government. Unfortunately, and some people would say it's a good thing, but the state of Florida used to be very heavily involved in providing incentives, particularly for businesses coming from outside of the area.
Sure.
They provided, incentives based on this salary, and the number of jobs.
Yep.
If you're locating in a Brownsfield, if you're locating, you had almost like a stacked level of incentives if you were bringing jobs to let's say a depressed area of, an urban core.
Sure.
And that really worked for a time. It really did. That's how we got Fidelity, FNF. Those were not here. And I was so happy to be a part of that. But as you mentioned, there are the tax rebates. I'll give an example. River City Marketplace, something we all know. River City Marketplace was not always there. It was for a long time a cow pasture. Green belted, but we had a developer, a REIT, come in from Dearborn, Michigan, who saw the potential that our own, that we couldn't see for ourselves. They said, we need a road between 95 and US 17. If you will build a road, we will invest. The road at the time was $12 million. With bond issuance, it was about 16. It was located in a community redevelopment area. We were able to provide the tax rebate funding, right? If they invested, it was directly tied to the amount they invested. And I'll never forget, Mayor Payton said, just make sure they have a Red Lobster and a movie theater, because that's all he heard on the, from the citizens of that area. They wanted a Red Lobster and a movie theater for that area of town, because they didn't have it.
All right.
So these folks were. I mean, it was a great. An incredible experiment. We built a road.
Yeah.
And look what happened to that area.
If you drive down that, they will come.
If you build it, they will come. So I think that's a great example of priming the pump. We encouraged one investor, and then so many other investors came in and filled in, including hospitals. If you drive down that, you've got the original footprint of the shopping center, but you have so much more. The Dick's that was there, that wasn't part of the original print. There's so many parts of that. I mean, it's a bustling, and as soon as we built that, housing started going in up there. Middle class, nice housing that was that attracted families.
So for downtown now, specifically today,
yes.
there's several projects that are going on. Biggest
Yeah.
one is Gateway Jacks.
Right,
Do you
right, worked on that.
Do you think that is a catalyst, and that is what's going to drive other developers to come in?
Yeah, so I've thought a lot about this. I had an opportunity, I have a contract with the DIA to sometimes work on projects and with my CRA experience. So I worked on the city side of the Gateway project with Brian Mall and the others there, the experience in Tampa and other places. And it's going to be a great project. It's going to be a destination. It will be a place, I think, where people want to live and want to go. And once they, park, they can walk around and navigate it easily and go to have an experience, right? Kind of the way the landing was supposed to be at one time. And it's fantastic because it's not located necessarily on the water. We also have, the city is doing a lot with the big parcels on the water. Right. So the former landing site, the Ford on Bay, we've got those bigger pieces, and they're coming. I mean, with city incentives. Where I see an opportunity is, we call those big projects the home runs. Right, in real estate, they're the home runs. Those are going to be the home runs. They're going to be the big projects. They're going to create a certain attraction. But where the day-to-day density that you want to see downtown comes from two places, primarily. It's going to come from residents, and it's going to come from businesses.
Okay.
We know
retail businesses?
No, I'm talking about like
office businesses.
Office businesses. I mean, and maybe kind of both. If you work downtown, you might want to live downtown, and there are some people who do that. Since the pandemic, we know, in your business that has, office space has taken a real hit. So cities are having to reimagine and rethink what they do with those spaces. But if we can, encourage that, and what I mean by that is if we can create the density by focusing on the singles and the doubles and the triples. Right? Because we've got some big projects going in. We've got, we've gone from, I think we're almost up to the 10,000 mark, or we will be up to the 10,000 mark in terms of residents soon. Particularly once you include, if you were to include Brooklyn, right? You're going to have it. And at least we'll have it, we have close grocers, not exactly, we need a good grocer downtown, but a strong kind of centrally located grocer. So, if you can provide the essential amenities that people are going to need, a drugstore, pharmacy, and a grocery store, which I think is probably a good role of government to, encourage, incentivize, to attract, and there are ways to do that. Then if there is a way, there are cities who have created, they're nonprofits, and they're nonprofit development companies, if that makes sense. But I've
never heard of such a thing.
Well, there's
Sounds
a great example.
Crazy idea.
It's a crazy idea, but it's been extraordinarily successful in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Cincinnati, Ohio
has a river running through it.
Nonprofit
development company called 3CDC. I'm not going to try to butcher the name, but it has, Cincinnati community, business, development. But essentially, what they do is they go in, they'll take, they'll acquire a piece of, they'll find developers, help them develop, actually do the development. So they're not the DIA. They're not the Downtown Regulatory Agency. They're the organization that will help develop, bring in a developer, and let's say, and what they will do is they'll keep the lease for the ground floor. That's part of how they, make the money to build, and then they will find a developer and property manager for, let's say, floors 2 through 10.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they have developed, like, I can't tell you how many communities around their river down there in Cincinnati. It's an unlikely place. It's some place you think, But we, a group of us, when I was with the Jacksonville Civic Council, we took a day trip there. Some of the then leaders of the community and former, a lot of folks who are very bullish, and developers who are very bullish on downtown.
I've never met a developer who's not bullish, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying bullish on downtown. Jacksonville is a very different. So, and it was fascinating. And it's funded, the initial funding comes from investors. So you raise investment funds, And it's literally like it's a nonprofit investment fund.
Interesting.
Yes. So developers, so your investors usually can be corporations.
Yeah.
Corporations can use it and banks can use it as part of the way to get CRA credits.
Yeah.
So there's
sure.
a lot of win-wins here. That if you create the right mechanism to stimulate, as I said, you're focused on the singles and the doubles and the triples. That infill in between the big parts. We have parts of it going on around kind of around Calford Chop House.
Right.
We have those areas. But Jacksonville, our downtown is so big. I think South Bank is good. It's going. So it's really focusing on. We need to focus on our a corridor downtown, and Laura Street's coming along.
Have we explored this issue, of the nonprofit?
Well, when I was at the Jacksonville Civic Council, it's something that we really looked into. We were able to get an executive on loan from CSX, from Michael Ward at the time, who had an expertise in real estate.
Okay.
Happy to give you his name, because he explored it and we really looked into it. And unfortunately, we just couldn't find the right, I don't know if it was the right timing, in all candor. I think now we have the right timing, because we've had folks who have raised, investment funds for downtown.
Sure.
It's not going to be the highest performing, fund on anyone's portfolio, but they will get their money back. I mean, it's kind of one of those, I'd love for you to contribute to the fund and you will get your money back.
Yeah.
Might not be at the highest percentage rate,
and
but
it's like owning a baseball team. You're contributing to the community.
Exactly.
And
you can see it.
Shaping downtown.
That's right.
You're not necessarily doing it for the 20% internal rate of return,
Right. And they have so 3CDC has a portfolio of properties that they manage, including some parking. This has been developing over time, but it's a very good example of, in preparing for, talking with you today, I thought, what is missing? We've got these large, big projects coming along, and I think, there's been a commitment, and as much as we can commit to those big projects, that's gonna, I believe that will take care of itself. But anybody, when you're talking to a developer, the related company, whoever, they're going to want to know what else is around there, what else is. So going back to your question, I think the Gateway project is going to be, it's going to be a home run. It's just a matter of when, right? So getting it, and it's going to be a great catalyst.
Yeah.
So how do we get those other projects to fill in around it?
Yeah.
And on the side streets, because that, and when you have those projects, you also can you have opportunities to create housing at different levels, price levels, which brings in a mix.
Because that's what we hear consistently is affordability, and affordability.
No question.
Right.
Right.
So the role of the government in hitting some of those singles and doubles is just as important as kind of the government's role in hitting the home runs.
So,
are there other cities that you've kind of looked at, Cincinnati being one of them, are there other cities that you think have gotten it right that we should look at?
Sure. We can go down to, Fort Lauderdale, for example.
Sure.
There was a time when Fort Lauderdale was not a place.
Fort Lickerdale is what it was called.
It wasn't the best, but one of the other things that I'm personally bullish on it is the DIA needs to be completely independent. It needs to be an independent authority so that its deals should not have to go through City Council. It is a community redevelopment board. Every other community redevelopment area in the state of Florida has an independent board, and they will get a deal done in 6 to 8 weeks.
Interesting.
So most developers around the state will say, I'm not going to Jacksonville because it takes too long.
Well, let me play devil's advocate with you, because the city seems like they are very engaged and they want development, they want projects.
Yeah.
So if you come to them with a nice shiny rendering, they'll give you the no?
Well, I think you'd have to talk to developers. Without disclosing any. You really have to talk to developers. Yes, there is a process if you know how to work the process, and you know how to do that. But right now there are multiple steps in that approval process, including the DDRB, including the DIA, then going to City Council and the mayor's office. So you have to work
a lot of red
multiple angles. But if you have the autonomy of the JTA or the JEA or the port, where you have a reporting relationship and a relationship, but the hard part about that, unfortunately, is that one of the key incentives that the DIA needs is the rev grant, the revenue, and that is county money technically. So it gets complicated quickly. When I was at the Civic Council, we drafted regulation to help DIA grow more independent. It didn't pass, but I do think that making it once you have an incentive program, make it as easy as possible for developers to get the rights, permitting. We know that those are things that just slow down the process, whether you're downtown or not. Downtown tends to be a little bit more, unfortunately, difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, so I really believe DIA should be empowered to go.
To act faster.
Yes.
Because, you're right. You go down to Lauderdale and it doesn't seem like there's incentives for developers in Lauderdale.
Well, not anymore,
because,
but there were.
Because they don't need them, right?
But they did.
Right.
I mean, I have colleagues who are developers down there, and they will tell you they would never come up here.
Right.
But they can get a deal done down there. And we have former colleagues who were at the DDA here, went down there, and they're still running the CRA down there and doing millions upon billions of deals.
Yeah, because if you go to Fort Lauderdale now versus 10 years ago when I was down there, like it is night and day.
It is.
It's night and day.
And even 10 years before that.
Yeah.
And that's when the CRAs were established, because CRAs, you have to, in order to establish one, you go through a whole process and determine that it is an underdeveloped, distressed area. So it has to meet certain criteria. And the goal is that eventually the reinvestment in those areas we will grow out of that. Right? I mean, that's the whole idea, is that eventually you don't need to be a CRA.
So how do we do this? How do we? I mean, I like what you're saying. I want to move forward. How do we as a community do that? How do we get
So it will take leadership. It's going to take leadership and vision, and someone who is absolutely driven and focused on just a few goals. Right? So it's going to be a partnership. It's as it always is, right? So those people who have the greatest impact, those entities, everything from JEA to JTA, the DIA, the city, but you've also got to have other developers, in my opinion. We have, the JWB is a fantastic example. We need more of them.
Okay.
And I don't know that they're all going to be homegrown. We're fortunate enough to have them here, along with Corner Lot. But we're going to have to attract outside investors and outside developers. How do we do that? How do we make it attractive to them? So then you have to look at, what are they going to look at?
Yeah.
They're going to look at
returns. They want returns.
Returns and rooftops. Retail follows rooftops.
Right.
But when it comes to putting in a dry cleaner and a pharmacy and I think that those are the catalytic stimulants that I would call and a grocer downtown. Those are things that downtown can do to stimulate and attract more. In my opinion, that I think in addition to the large projects.
That all makes sense. They're looking for a replacement right now for Lori.
They are.
Would you? It almost sounds like you would encourage them to put the pause on that and maybe not put the pause on it necessarily, but put somebody in who is going to be able to be transformative. They're doing a nationwide search.
I know it.
Would you rather see that person, locally who knows some of the issues and can fight it, or would you rather have somebody from Cincinnati come in with a fresh vision?
I think it's going to depend on the individual, but definitely a transformative leader.
Yeah.
I mean, and someone with vision. we have people with vision here.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of their gravitas and influence and ability to execute. Because at the end of the day, you can talk the talk, but you've got to be able to walk the walk and make those deals happen.
Yeah.
And Andre Wallace was a great example of someone like that who came in, and now he is, working here and living here. But he came, like, he did some work in Miami.
Right.
Miami wasn't, he'll tell you. If you go back to the old Miami, everything they did. So, but I think it would be helpful for whoever it is to understand the tools they have available to them, and come up and begin to build. Not that we don't have bridges already with developers and the nonprofit and the developer community, but more of that.
Yeah.
I think having that candid conversation with developers, both external and internal to Jacksonville, is going to be really important. So I don't think there should be a pause. I think they should be full steam ahead. But I don't know the exact criteria that they're looking for. But it should be a transformative leader and not a follower.
I'm putting your name in the hat, just so you know.
Yeah. You're not the first person who said that. That's right.
Should and I'm not calling anybody out here, but should Shad Khan, his involvement in the city has been fantastic, right? He's the Jaguars, right?
Right.
But you look at what he's done with the Jaguars versus what Vinnick did with the Lightning.
Yeah.
And Vinnick completely transformed all of downtown.
He did.
Should Shad be more involved in that type of redevelopment? And not that he's not doing anything. He's put up the Four Seasons. He's put up the first new office building in 100 years here. So I get it. How do we get more people like him?
Right. Yeah. One of the only billionaires here.
Right.
And doesn't live here yet.
Right.
But hopefully will. We want this to be one of his homes.
Right.
And so, I can't speak for Mr. Khan. He certainly has stepped up and rebuilding and really transforming that area of town, an area of town that I think most people would have not have put on the priority list, right?
Yeah.
But he's really is making it into something, a destination.
Right.
Right? Other than the Florida Theater and the performing arts area, you're going to that area of town if you're coming in. It's just what do you have to stop for along the way?
Right.
So
besides 301 West Bay.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Besides this lovely place. So I do think there is a social responsibility that comes with that level of public investment.
Yes.
And certainly the public investment, there's a match, and he is doing the Four Seasons and all of that. But I would hope that there would be an increase over time in his literal investment into the city. But it takes someone like Mr. Khan even if he were to help attract other developers and other companies to the area, because with someone like that, he wants the city to be successful, and so someone who has literally a global voice can use that.
Yeah.
Should be out there, with Jacksonville, and from everything I can tell, he is.
Yeah.
But there's an opportunity in terms of what happens. Mr. Vinnick, was exceptional, but my understanding also is that he worked directly with, those in the administration. And I should say also that Tampa had the opportunity people have different mixed feelings about term limits, but when you look at Charleston or you look at cities that have really come a long way, Pittsburgh, they had a consistent leadership. They had a consistent political leadership for a long time. And many will tell you, but for that ability and that singular vision of an individual over a long period of time, not just 8 years, but a decade or two. Again, that's up to the voters in terms of what happens there. But I do think that we need to have a vision and stick to it at the end of the day.
Okay.
And having Mr. Khan as not only an investor but a spokesperson for that, an active spokesperson would be I think would be invaluable.
Yeah, yeah. Are there things that I haven't touched on that you think are important to downtown Jacksonville? I know we covered a lot, but
Yeah, the thing that comes to my mind, unfortunately, is it needs to be cleaner.
okay,
I mean, there is a perception of not safe. I think that is a perception issue. Lighting. So when we talk about infrastructure, I would like to see greater investment in lighting
Okay.
and lit paths,
Yeah.
especially at night, or when you're coming from an office building.
sure,
I mean, I know of business owners who have left.
yeah,
They didn't want to leave out of concern for their own safety because there were homeless people in there, and
Yep.
and if you were to look at just downtown sidewalks
yeah,
15 years ago and look at them today,
interesting.
unfortunately, we need to clean up downtown.
Interesting.
It needs to be, I think, like a great pressure washing.
Need to get a pressure washing
Wait,
company down
I'm not
here.
kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean,
Yeah.
because you're constantly making an impression on someone.
Yeah.
People are visiting.
Sure.
Or either they're visiting downtown as residents, or they're visiting. We have school children coming for for play. Just that's really important, and it's something that over time, public facilities maintenance or even public maintenance just goes, sometimes it gets cut.
Yeah.
But I think we really need to focus on that and make an investment in that, because you can schedule an event, but if people they want to come to a clean place, a
Yeah.
safe place, a place that feels, alive.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, cigarette, but I mean, you
Yeah.
can't help litter, but having more just, there used to be a time when, and not to knock DVI at all, they're doing a lot of great work, but you could see a downtown ambassador, you knew you could ask for questions, you saw them everywhere. They were a constant presence and a comforting presence in many ways. They'd help you out. But we don't see that as much. So I would say homelessness
Yep.
is an issue,
Yep.
and I know that's being actively worked on. We have some incredible homeless organizations in the city. They're actively working on that. We understand it's a complex problem. It's not just the lack of a
Yeah,
home.
sure.
But in addition to that, really just cleanliness, just making it look attractive,
Yeah.
and even lighting.
Yeah.
Like I said, lighting. So
That makes sense. That makes sense.
those are two.
I agree, and I've heard that before
Yeah.
from other people.
Yeah.
So
We can do better. We have done better, and we can do better.
yeah, yeah. Last question.
Okay.
I always ask this as the last question,
All right.
and this is personal to you.
All right.
If there was a book written about you, what would the title be?
That's a great question.
Notice that wasn't on the list of
No, no, it wasn't on
pre-prepared
the
questions,
list.
because I want you to
Yeah. I have had so many, I've often thought that if I write a book, it's going to be called Life in the Arena.
Life in the Arena.
So, and it's from the Teddy Roosevelt
Okay.
portion of his speech about the man in the arena,
Yeah.
or the woman in the arena. My entire career has been focused on, transforming things and doing things, and with a bent toward action, right? Advocating for something that will be transformative, and then implementing that.
Yeah.
In every aspect of my career, and I've been fortunate to have that experience, as well as on the nonprofit boards I've served on. So I think, if we can celebrate the day-to-day people who are in the arena, not necessarily, myself, I'm just saying, there are so many experiences, we can learn
Yeah.
from others, and the takeaways. So I'd say Life in the Arena.
I like it.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's
Great.
perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did. You've got a great group here. This is
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you for doing this also. I
Of
think
course.
it's such an important conversation, and bringing folks together is different ideas. Only good can come out of this.
Well, somebody asked me, they're like, why are you limiting it to just downtown? And I said, because you can ask 100 different people about their thoughts on downtown, and you're going to get 100 different answers. Like there's no shortage of input that needs to happen if we're all going to figure this out together. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
All
I
right.
totally agree with you. Great.
Thanks.
Good to